The millionaire was about to lose his company until the girl showed up with the lost folder and had inside were the only documents capable of proving his innocence. The girl was the forgotten employee's daughter, and she only wanted food. But with that simple gesture, she saved an entire empire and the heart of a man who never knew how to love. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The morning arrived grey over New York City, with that heavy sky that seemed to foretell a storm. Michael Taylor woke up before his alarm, as he had always done for over 30 years. The apartment on the Upper East Side was silent, organized, cold. Every object in its place, every surface gleaming, every room immaculate. That was how he liked it. That was how he controlled it. The world outside could be chaotic, unpredictable, but in here, everything obeyed his will. 58 years old, impeccably combed grey hair, bespoke suits, and a reputation built brick by brick. Michael Taylor Engineering and Construction was more than a company. It was the reflection of a lifetime dedicated to a single purpose. From the age of 22, when he dropped out of architecture school midway to take over a small renovation business he inherited from his uncle, Michael had known no rest. He hadn't known long vacations, idle weekends, or wasted nights. Every minute had been invested, every dollar reinvested, every opportunity seized with an almost brutal determination. He never married, never wanted to. Relationships required time, attention, emotional commitment. He had none of those resources to spare. There had been women, of course, over the years. Some lasted for months, others just weeks. All eventually left, tired of competing with spreadsheets, reports, and visits to construction sites. Michael didn't blame them. He knew exactly who he was, knew what he had chosen. And for decades, that choice seemed right. The company grew, multiplied, became a benchmark in the New York market. Residential and commercial buildings, large-scale renovations, even some public projects. The Taylor name was synonymous with quality, punctuality, seriousness. But that morning, as he drank his black, sugarless coffee, Michael felt a different weight in his chest. It wasn't just fatigue, it was something deeper, more disturbing. For the past 3 months, a shadow had loomed over everything he had built. An accusation, bid rigging, forged documents, bribery of public officials. The words were harsh, cutting, and came from a rival consortium that hadn't accepted losing a multi-million-dollar contract for the renovation of a housing project in the Bronx. Michael knew he was innocent. Every procedure had been followed to the letter, every document approved by the competent bodies, every cent accounted for and declared. But in the business world, the truth sometimes mattered less than the narrative, and the narrative now circulating in the corridors of the New York real estate market was devastating. Michael Taylor, the untouchable, the incorruptible, was being accused of foul play. The decisive meeting would take place in 2 days. An extraordinary assembly with investors, public authority representatives, and members of the advisory board. If he didn't prove his innocence irrefutably, he would lose not only the contract but also the trust of old partners, the respect accumulated over decades, and possibly the company itself. Worse still, hundreds of workers who depended on Taylor Engineering would be unemployed. Masons, electricians, plumbers, engineers, architects, a whole chain of people who trusted him to support their families. The complete dossier proving his innocence was in a black leather briefcase with original documents, printed emails, signed contracts, technical reports, and even recordings of meetings. Michael guarded that briefcase as if it were gold. It was always in his office, inside a locked cabinet, away from prying eyes, until the previous week, until the day when, upon arriving in the morning, he discovered that the briefcase was gone. Michael still remembered the feeling, his stomach sinking, his hands shaking, his mind racing in 1,000 directions at once. Who could have taken it? How did they get into the office? There were cameras, there was security, there was access control, and yet someone had managed. Someone knew exactly what to look for and where to find it. This was no accident. It was planned, calculated, cruel sabotage. In the following days, Michael moved heaven and earth. He hired private investigators, reviewed all the security footage, interrogated employees, searched every corner of the building. Nothing. The briefcase had simply vanished, as if it had never existed. And without it, Michael was cornered. He could try to reconstruct the documents, but it would take weeks, maybe months. And he only had 2 days. That morning, sitting at the kitchen table, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. Not the common fear of a calculated risk or a risky deal, but a deep, visceral fear of losing everything, of seeing a lifetime's work crumble because of a lie, of facing failure after so much sacrifice, of admitting that in the end maybe it hadn't been worth so many sacrifices, so many sleepless nights, so many relationships left behind. And for what? To see it all fall apart in a matter of days? He finished his coffee, put on the grey suit he had laid out the night before, and left the apartment. The traffic was hellish, as always. Horns, exhaust fumes, motorcycles weaving between cars, pedestrians crossing against the light. New York was like that. Chaotic, noisy, relentless. Michael used to like that. The city reflected his own nature, always moving, always building, always fighting. But that morning everything seemed hostile, threatening, as if the city itself were conspiring against him. The office was on 5th Avenue, in a glass and steel commercial building he himself had helped design years ago. Michael went up to the 12th floor, greeted the receptionist with a mechanical nod, and locked himself in his office. He sat in the leather chair, swiveled to the window, and just stood there watching the city move below. People rushing, cars honking, street vendors setting up their stalls, executives crossing the street with phones glued to their ears, lives happening while his threatened to collapse. It was then that he saw her. A small, thin, poorly dressed girl, standing on the corner of 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, worn-out clothes, broken flip-flops, disheveled hair. And in her hands, holding it as if it were a treasure, a black leather briefcase. The same briefcase, exactly the same. Michael shot up, his heart racing. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But it was. He knew every detail of that briefcase, every scratch, every mark. It was his. He was absolutely sure. He didn't think twice. He ran out of his office, took the stairs without waiting for the elevator, crossed the lobby under the astonished gaze of the doorman, and reached the street breathless, sweaty, desperate. He looked in every direction. The girl was still there, now sitting on the curb, opening and closing the briefcase as if playing with a toy. Michael approached slowly, trying to control his breathing, trying to seem less threatening. The girl looked up, and he saw something in her eyes that paralyzed him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't suspicion. It was weariness. An old, deep weariness, the kind that shouldn't exist in eyes so young. "Hi," he said, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "What's your name?" The girl didn't answer. She just stared at him, motionless, like a cornered animal. "My name is Michael," he continued, crouching down to her level. "That briefcase you're holding, it's very important to me. Do you know where it came from?" "Found it," the girl finally said, her voice low, almost inaudible. "Found it where?" "Near the trash can, on the street back there. Thought it was just an old briefcase, but it has a lot of paper inside." Michael felt such immense relief that he had to steady himself to keep from collapsing right there. The documents, they were there. She had found the documents. Someone had tried to get rid of them, throwing them in the trash, but hadn't counted on the sharp eyes of a street kid. "Can you give it back to me?" Michael asked, holding out his hand. The girl recoiled, clutching the briefcase to her chest. "I found it. It's mine now." Michael took a deep breath. He could just take it by force. She was a child. He was a strong adult. But something in those eyes stopped him. Something he couldn't name. "I'll give you money," he offered. "How much do you want?" The girl thought for a moment, her head tilted to the side. "I don't want money, I want food." Michael blinked, surprised. "Food?" She nodded. "Okay. Let's get something to eat. But you give me the briefcase afterward, deal?" The girl hesitated, but eventually agreed. They walked together to a nearby bakery, Michael clearing a path through the crowd, the girl following behind with the briefcase clutched to her body. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, trying to understand. Where were her parents? Why was such a small child alone on Fifth Avenue on a Tuesday morning? Why did no one seem to notice her, as if she were invisible? At the bakery, Michael ordered bagels, juice, cake, a sandwich, everything the girl pointed to at the counter. She ate as if she hadn't seen food in days. She devoured every piece, licked her fingers, drank the juice in large gulps. Michael just sat there, on the other side of the table, watching in silence. Something inside him began to stir, something he didn't recognize. It was discomfort, it was guilt. It was a strange feeling that, while he was building skyscrapers and accumulating contracts, there was a whole world of hungry children he had never seen. "What's your name?" he asked again, his voice softer now. "Lily," she replied between bites. "Lily. A beautiful name. How old are you, Lily?" 9, I think. I don't know for sure." "Don't you go to school?" Lily shrugged. "I used to, but not anymore." "Why not?" She didn't answer, just kept eating, her eyes fixed on her plate. Michael didn't press. He waited for her to finish, paid the bill, and then gently held out his hand again. "The briefcase, Lily, you promised." She looked at him, then at the briefcase, then back at him. There was a silent struggle happening there. Michael could see it. Lily didn't want to trust. She couldn't trust. But at the same time, something about this man in the grey suit, who had paid for her food without asking for anything but the briefcase, seemed different. Finally, she handed it over. Michael took the briefcase with both hands, as if holding something sacred. He opened it slowly, his heart tight. The documents were all there, contracts, reports, emails, recordings, all intact, all preserved. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked him over. When he opened his eyes, Lily was already getting up to leave. "Wait," Michael said, gently holding her arm. "Where are you going?" "I don't know." "To the street." "You live on the street." Lily nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Michael stood there, paralyzed, holding the briefcase in one hand and Lily's thin arm in the other. He had what he needed. He could just thank her, give her some money, and go back to his office, prepare for the meeting, prove his innocence, save his company. It was the obvious thing to do, the rational thing. It was what anyone would do. But for the first time in decades, Michael Taylor didn't do the obvious thing. "Come with me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're going to stay with me today." Lily frowned, suspicious. "Why?" "Because you helped me. And now I want to help you." She stared at him, trying to decipher if this was truth or a lie, if it was safe or dangerous. Michael held her gaze, and something in that moment changed. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an impulse, something instinctive, something that came from a place he didn't know existed inside him. They went back to the office together. Michael quickly explained to the receptionist that Lily was the daughter of an acquaintance and needed to stay there for a few hours. The young woman gave the dirty, ragged girl a strange look, but didn't question it. Michael Taylor was the boss, after all. In his office, he settled Lily in an armchair by the window and gave her paper and pens to draw. She accepted timidly, not quite understanding what was happening. Michael then sat at his desk and began to review the documents, one by one, organizing them, highlighting the main points, preparing his defense for the meeting. But every now and then, he would look up and watch Lily. She drew simple things, houses, trees, stick figures. Nothing elaborate, but there was something in those drawings that touched him. Maybe it was the innocence, the simplicity, the attempt to create beauty in a world that had only shown her ugliness. The hours passed. Lily ate again, this time chips and soda, that Michael had someone bring up. She took a shower in the office bathroom, using a clean towel and soap that smelled of lavender. She wore a large t-shirt Michael had stored in a closet, used for changing after visits to construction sites. It was huge on her, but it was clean, fresh-smelling, comfortable. And then, as the sun began to set outside, painting the sky orange and red, Michael realized something that scared him. He didn't want Lily to leave. He didn't want to return her to the street, to the cold, to the hunger, to the abandonment. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to care for her. He wanted to be someone she could trust. It was absurd. He, a 58-year-old man who had never had children, who had never wanted them, who had never known how to deal with them, suddenly feeling something paternal, something protective, something that defied all the logic of his practical, calculated life. "Lily," he said, his voice hesitant, "do you have a place to sleep tonight?" She shrugged. "I always find a way." "What if you slept at my house tonight? I have a guest room. You can stay there, just for tonight." Lily looked at him, her eyes wide. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Michael didn't have an answer. He couldn't explain it. He just knew he couldn't let her go. "Because you deserve it," he said finally. "Because every child deserves a safe place to sleep." Lily didn't reply, but for the first time since he'd seen her on the corner, she smiled. A small, shy smile, full of doubt, but a smile nonetheless. They left the office together, went down to the garage together, got into Michael's car together. He drove in silence, crossing the city, passing wide avenues and narrow streets, until he reached the Upper East Side, the building where he lived, the apartment that had always been so empty. Michael showed Lily the guest room. It was simple, clean, with a single bed, a desk, and an empty bookshelf. She entered slowly, touching things as if they were fragile, as if they might disappear at any moment. "Make yourself at home," Michael said. "Tomorrow we'll figure things out, but tonight you're safe here." Lily lay down on the bed, still wearing the huge t-shirt, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Michael stood, in the doorway, watching her. And then, for the first time in many years, he felt something beyond pragmatism, beyond ambition, beyond control. He felt humanity. And that night, while Lily slept in the next room and Michael stayed awake in the living room, reviewing the documents one more time, he realized that his life had just changed, not just because of the approaching meeting, not just because of the company he needed to save, but because of a 9-year-old girl who had found a lost briefcase and, without knowing it, had also found a lost man. The next day, Michael woke up early, but Lily was already awake. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table, looking out the window. She turned when she heard him enter, and he saw in her eyes the same silent question as always. What's going to happen now? Michael made coffee, toast, juice. They ate together in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just the silence of two people trying to understand what this moment meant. After breakfast, Michael needed to go to the office. The meeting was the next day, and he still had a lot to prepare. But he couldn't leave Lily alone in the apartment, and he couldn't just put her back on the street. Something inside him refused that idea with all its might. He called the receptionist and asked her to find someone, a social worker, someone who could advise him on what to do. But that would take time, and Michael didn't have time. So, once again, he made an impulsive decision. He took Lily with him. At the office, she stayed in the corner of his room again, drawing, reading old magazines, eating cookies. The employees started to notice, to murmur, to ask questions. Michael ignored them. He was too focused on the meeting, on the documents, on the defense he needed to articulate. And then, that afternoon, something happened that would change everything. A man walked into the office unannounced, Roger Foster, Michael's former partner, someone who had worked with him in the early years of the company, but had been pushed out almost a decade ago due to irreconcilable differences. Roger had always been ambitious, but in a different way. He wanted shortcuts, shady deals, quick profits. Michael had always refused, and that had cost them their partnership. Roger was tall, thin, with cold eyes and a calculated smile. He entered the room as if he still owned the place, greeted Michael with a handshake that was too firm, and sat down uninvited. "Heard about your situation," Roger said, his tone falsely concerned. "Fraud accusation, what a terrible thing, isn't it?" Michael stared at him impassive. "I'm not guilty, and I'll prove it tomorrow." "I'm sure you will," Roger replied, his smile widening. "But you know what's funny? I heard you were looking for some lost documents, and that a certain little girl found them for you. What luck, right?" Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He knew. Roger knew about Lily. "What do you want, Roger?" "Just came to say hi. And maybe to warn you that if I were you, I'd be careful who you bring into the office. People talk, Michael, and sometimes the stories they tell can be very damaging." It was a veiled threat, but a clear one. Roger knew about Lily, knew about the documents, and was willing to use it against Michael in some way. After he left, Michael just sat there, his heart heavy. He had saved the documents, but now there was another problem, and this problem had a name. Roger Foster. A man who didn't forget, didn't forgive, and certainly wouldn't give up until he saw Michael destroyed. The morning of the meeting arrived with a deafening silence. Michael woke up at 5 in the morning, as always, but this time it wasn't habit that got him out of bed. It was anxiety. He got up, walked to the kitchen, and found Lily already awake, sitting at the table, her knees hugged to her chest, staring blankly into space. "Didn't you sleep well?" Michael asked, filling the kettle with water. Lily shrugged, the gesture he was beginning to recognize as her answer to almost everything. "Had some bad dreams," she said, her voice low. Michael sat down next to her, not quite sure what to say. He had never been good with words of comfort, had never needed to be. But now, looking at this child he had so abruptly brought into his life, he felt he had to try. "Want to talk about them?" he offered. Lily glanced at him sideways, as if assessing whether he was being sincere or just polite. "I dreamed you sent me away," she said finally, "that I woke up and you were gone, and I was back on the street alone." Michael felt a tightness in his chest. It wasn't a physical ache, but an emotional one, something he hadn't experienced in so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. "I'm not going to send you away, Lily. I promise. People always promise, but then they leave anyway." There was a brutal truth in those words, a bitter wisdom that no 9-year-old should possess. Michael sat there not knowing what to reply because Lily was right. People made promises and broke them. He himself had done it, with suppliers, with clients, with the few women who had tried to get close to him. Promises were easy to make and easy to break, but this time he didn't want to break it. "I'll do my best to be different," he said, and was surprised to realize he was serious. Lily didn't answer, but something in her expression softened, as if she wanted to believe, even though she knew it was risky. They had breakfast together in silence, and then Michael put on his best suit, the navy blue one he only wore on important occasions, and prepared for the meeting that would decide his future. Lily would stay with a neighbor whom Michael had convinced, with some difficulty, to look after the girl for a few hours. The woman, Mrs. Evans, a retired lady who lived on the same floor, had agreed more out of pity than desire, but she had agreed. Before leaving, Michael knelt in front of Lily and held her small, cold hands. "I'll be back soon," he said, "and when I get back, we'll talk about what we're going to. Do, okay?" Lily nodded, but her eyes were distant, as if she were already preparing for disappointment. The office was tense when Michael arrived. Employees greeted him with nervous smiles, secretaries averted their gazes, the receptionist barely managed to hide her concern. Everyone knew what was at stake. If Michael lost this meeting, he wouldn't be the only one to suffer. The entire company could collapse, and with it, dozens of families who depended on the salaries paid by Taylor Engineering. The meeting was to be held in the conference room on the top floor, a large space with a long solid wood table and windows overlooking the full expanse of Fifth Avenue. Michael arrived half an hour early, organized his documents, mentally rehearsed his defense, and tried to control the nervousness that insisted on showing up in his trembling hands and uneven breathing. The guests began to arrive, representatives from the rival consortium, members of the advisory board, old investors, even some journalists from publications specializing in civil construction. And then, to Michael's surprise and irritation, Roger Foster entered the room as if he had every right to be there. "Roger, what are you doing here?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I was invited by the board. They thought it would be useful to have an outside opinion from someone who knows your work methods well," Roger replied, a crooked smile on his lips. Michael felt anger rise, hot and sharp, but forced himself to swallow it. This was not the time for personal quarrels. It was time for facts, for proof, for logic. The meeting began. The representative of the rival consortium, a portly man with a grey moustache named Ernest Caldwell, stood up and began to present the accusations. Forged documents, inconsistent dates, suspicious signatures, undeclared payments. Every word was a stab, every accusation an attempt to destroy the reputation Michael had spent decades building. When Ernest finished, all eyes turned to Michael. It was his turn. He stood up, picked up the black leather briefcase that Lily had found, opened it on the table and began. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I understand the seriousness of the accusations being made against me and my company, and that is precisely why I have brought here today every document, every piece of proof, every shred of evidence that proves not only my innocence but also the legality and transparency of all procedures adopted in the project in question." He was methodical, surgical. He took each accusation, one by one, and dismantled it. He showed original contracts with stamps and notarized signatures. He presented emails with time and date verified by the servers. He displayed technical reports signed by certified professionals. For every alleged irregularity pointed out, Michael had a solid, irrefutable, documented answer. The room grew quiet. Expressions changed from suspicion to surprise, from surprise to embarrassment. Ernest Caldwell tried to counter-argue, but his words sounded weak against the evidence presented. Roger, sitting in the corner, kept his face impassive, but Michael could see the tension in his jaw, the irritation in his eyes. After nearly 2 hours, Michael finished his presentation. He put the documents back in the briefcase, closed it calmly, and looked at each person in the room. "I built this company with honesty," he said. "I've made mistakes, as any human being does, but I have never, ever used illicit or dishonest means to secure a contract. And I hope that, after what you have seen here today, you gentlemen understand that." There was a moment of heavy silence, and then the chairman of the advisory board, an elderly gentleman with thick glasses named Dr. Henry, stood up and clapped. Slowly, others followed. It wasn't an ovation, but it was acknowledgement. Michael had proven his innocence. The meeting was concluded with the unanimous decision to dismiss the accusations and proceed with the contract. Ernest Caldwell left the room with his head down, without greeting anyone. The investors shook Michael's hand, some apologizing for having doubted him, and Roger, the last to leave, stopped beside Michael and whispered, low enough for only him to hear, "You won today." But this isn't over, Michael. Far from it. After everyone had left, Michael was alone in the conference room. He sat in one of the chairs, rested his elbows on the table, and let his head fall forward. He had won. He had saved the company, saved the jobs, saved his reputation. But instead of feeling euphoric, he just felt tired, a deep exhaustion that came from within, from a place he couldn't name. He thought of Lily, how she was doing, if Mrs. Evans was taking good care of her, if she was afraid he wouldn't come back. And then he realized something that surprised him. What had motivated him most in that meeting hadn't been the company, hadn't been the money, hadn't been his reputation. It had been the idea of going home and finding Lily there, waiting for him. Michael left the office in the middle of the afternoon, dismissed his driver, and drove himself back to the Upper East Side. The traffic was heavy, but he didn't even mind. He needed time to think, to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. He had found the documents, proven his innocence, saved the company. But he had also found a child, taken her home, promised to take care of her. And now he had to decide what to do. When he arrived at the apartment, Lily was sitting on the sofa next to Mrs. Evans, who was knitting something colorful. The girl stood up as soon as she saw him, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and anxiety. "You came back," she said, as if she still couldn't believe it. "I said I would," Michael replied, taking off his jacket and loosening his tie. Mrs. Evans stood up, put her knitting in her bag, and patted Michael on the shoulder. "She's a good girl," the lady said. "Polite, quiet, but she needs care, Michael. She needs attention." "I know," he replied. After Mrs. Evans left, Michael sat on the sofa next to Lily. They sat there, in silence, for a few minutes. Then he began to speak. "Lily, I won the meeting. I proved I did nothing wrong. The company is safe." Lily nodded, but she didn't seem to fully understand what that meant. "And now," Michael continued, "I need to ask you something. Do you have anywhere to go, any family, anyone? Who takes care of you?" Lily looked down. "My mom died. My dad, I never knew him. I have an aunt, but she said she can't take care of me, that she already has too many kids and no money for one more." Michael felt his chest tighten again. This girl, who had found his briefcase by chance, who had saved his documents without even knowing it, was completely alone in the world. "What if," he said slowly, "I took care of you? Not just for a few days, but for real. What if I tried to give you a home?" Lily looked up, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" "Like, you live here, go to school, have clothes, food, a room of your own, and I would try to be, I don't know, someone you can trust. Why would you do that?" It was the same question she had asked before, and Michael still didn't have a complete answer, but he had something. "Because I think we need each other," he said. "I've spent my whole life building things, but I never built a family. I never had anyone to take care of. And you deserve someone to take care of you. So maybe we can try this together." Lily was silent for a long time. Michael could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between hope and fear. "What if it goes wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Then we'll try again," Michael replied, "until it goes right." Lily bit her lower lip, thought for another moment, and then, finally, she nodded. The following months were a constant battle. Michael hired a team of public relations experts to try to reverse the negative narrative Roger had planted in the media. But it was like fighting, against the tide. Every time they managed to publish a positive story, 3 negative ones would appear the next day. Every time they presented proof of his good intentions, new insinuations, new doubts, new veiled accusations would arise. Lily was suffering. At school, the other children avoided her, or worse, mocked her. "The magazine girl," they called her. "The scandal girl." The teachers tried to protect her, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. Lily came home every day more withdrawn, sadder, more distant. Michael tried to compensate. He cooked her favorite dishes, bought her books, took her on trips, to the park. But he knew it wasn't enough. Lily needed more than food and gifts. She needed dignity, respect, a place where she could just be a child, not an object of gossip. It was Dr. Cameron, the psychologist, who suggested something different. During one of their sessions, while Lily was drawing in the corner of the room, Dr. Cameron called Michael for a private conversation in the hallway. "She's regressing," Dr. Cameron said, her voice low but firm. "All the progress we made in the first few weeks is being undone by the public exposure. If this continues, Michael, you could lose her. Not legally, but emotionally." "What do I do?" Michael asked, desperation showing in his voice. "I've tried everything. Lawyers, PR firms. I even offered interviews to explain my side. Nothing works." Dr. Cameron thought for a moment, then said something that would change everything. "Have you ever thought about showing the truth in a deeper way? Not through shallow interviews or official statements, but through something real, human, that shows who you and Lily really are?" "What do you mean?" "A documentary, a true story told honestly, without filters. Show your life, show hers, show how you got here. People need to see that this isn't a marketing stunt or an attempt to clean up your image. It's a story of 2 people who found each other at the right moment and decided to help each other." Michael hesitated. The idea of exposing his private life even more, of opening his doors to cameras and microphones, went against everything he had always been. But looking at Lily through the ajar door, seeing her drawing alone, her shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the world, he knew he had to try. He found an independent filmmaker named John Miller, a man in his early 40s known for his documentaries on social issues. John was skeptical at first. He had seen many attempts by rich businessmen trying to polish their images with tear-jerking stories. But when he met Lily, when he spent an entire afternoon talking with her, listening to her story, seeing her drawings, something changed. "This isn't about you," John told Michael afterward. It's about her. About how many Lilies there are out there, invisible, forgotten. If you let me tell this story the right way, without interference, without fabricated scripts, I'll do it, Michael agreed, even knowing he was taking a risk. For 2 months, John and his small crew filmed everything. The daily life in the apartment, the trips to school, the sessions with Dr. Cameron, the meetings at the company, even difficult moments, like when Lily had a panic attack at school and Michael had to rush out of an important meeting to pick her up. They also interviewed other people. Mrs. Evans, who told how she had seen Michael transform from a cold, distant man into someone capable of caring and worrying. Beatrice, the lawyer, who explained the legal difficulties faced by single men trying to adopt. Dr. Cameron, who spoke about Lily's trauma and how Michael was doing an admirable job trying to heal it. And even some employees from Taylor Engineering who revealed how their boss had changed, how he now arrived at the office later because he had to take Lily to school, how he left earlier to help her with her homework. But the most powerful part of the documentary was when John achieved something no one expected. He found people who had known Julia, Lily's mother, neighbors, former colleagues, even an old boss. And what they revealed completely changed the narrative. Julia had not been a criminal. She had been a hard-working, honest woman who did everything to support her daughter alone. The theft accusation at Taylor Engineering was never proven because it never happened. It had been a setup by a supervisor who wanted to get rid of her for personal reasons. And who was this supervisor? A man who had worked directly with Roger Foster in the last years he was still at the company. When the documentary was released, first at independent film festivals and then on a popular streaming platform, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded. Hashtags demanding justice for Lily and Michael became trending topics. Journalists who had previously published negative stories now apologized. And most importantly, public opinion turned completely. People shared their own stories of adoption, of fostering, of how a child can transform a life. Politicians began to talk about the need for reforms in adoption laws, especially for single people. Social movements organized rallies demanding that Lily's custody process be finally approved. And Roger Foster, who had worked so hard to destroy Michael, saw his plan fall apart. Worse still, his connection to the false accusation against Julia was exposed. Businessmen who used to do business with him began to distance themselves. His own company started losing contracts. He tried to defend himself, gave interviews denying everything, but it was too late. The truth had come out, and there was no hiding it again. 3 weeks after the documentary's release, Michael received the call he had been waiting for months. Lily's permanent custody had been approved. He could begin the formal adoption process if he wanted to, and he wanted to. More than anything in the world, he wanted to. When he told Lily, she didn't react the way he expected. She didn't jump for joy, she didn't smile, she didn't shout. Instead, she became very quiet, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands clasped in her lap. "Lily," Michael called, concerned. "Aren't you happy?" She looked up and he saw tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. "I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out this is a dream," she whispered. Michael sat next to her, pulled her into a hug. "It's not a dream, Lily, it's real. You're going to stay here, with me, forever, I promise." And this time, when he made the promise, Lily believed him. Life began to reorganize. Michael rented a larger house in Greenwich Village, a brownstone with a backyard where Lily could play, plant flowers, have a space of her own. He renovated one of the rooms and let Lily decorate it however she wanted. She chose yellow walls, white curtains, a wooden desk where she could draw and do her homework. Lily started smiling again. Gradually, she began to open up to Michael, telling him stories from when she was little, the few good memories she had of her mother, the dreams she had for the future. And Michael listened to everything, every word, every pause, every emotion. He was learning to be a father, and Lily was learning to trust. At school, things also improved. After the documentary, Lily went from being the scandal girl to being seen with more empathy. Some children even approached her, wanting to be friends. Lily was cautious, but she was trying, and that was already enormous progress. It was during a school science project that Lily discovered her interest in architecture. The teacher asked each student to draw their dream house, explaining why that space was important. While the other children drew castles or mansions full of swimming pools, Lily drew something different. A simple but welcoming building with many windows to let the light in, a garden out front, and benches where people could sit and talk. When the teacher asked why Lily had drawn that, she answered with a maturity impressive for her age. Because everyone deserves a place that is safe and beautiful, not just rich people. People who live on the street deserve it too. Poor people deserve it too. I lived on the street, and I know how bad it is not to have a place of your own. So when I grow up, I want to build houses like this. Houses that aren't expensive, but are real, made with care. The teacher was so touched that she called Michael, told him about the drawing and what Lily had said. Michael asked to see the drawing, and when Lily showed him, he was silent for a long time, observing every detail. "Do you really want to be an architect?" he asked. "I do, but not the kind that makes fancy. Buildings just for rich people. I want to make buildings for people who need them." Michael felt something move within him. An idea. Something big, transformative, that could give new meaning not only to Lily's life, but to the very company he had built. The next day, he called an extraordinary meeting with the board of Taylor Engineering. He presented a proposal that left everyone speechless. He wanted to create a new division in the company, focused exclusively on low-cost social housing. It wouldn't be pure philanthropy, he explained. It would be a sustainable business model with public-private partnerships, special financing and innovative technologies to reduce costs. And the goal would be to build decent housing for low-income families, especially in the outer boroughs of New York. Some directors supported it immediately. Others were more skeptical, questioning the profitability, the risks, the feasibility. But Michael was determined. He used his own reputation, his own resources, to ensure the project got off the ground. And to his surprise, he found support not only within the company, but also from external investors who had been moved by the documentary and wanted to be part of that transformation. The division was created and named the Lily Project, in honor of the girl who had inspired it all. And even though she was still a child, Lily was invited to participate. Not to make technical decisions, of course, but to give opinions, to look at the projects through the eyes of someone who had experienced homelessness firsthand, to bring a perspective that no trained architect could have. Michael took Lily to visit the sites where the buildings would be constructed, showed her the blueprints, explained the processes. And Lily asked questions, lots of questions. Why not put more windows there? Why not leave a green space here? Why not make the rooms a little bigger, even if it means fewer units? And Michael listened, took notes, brought the suggestions to the architects, and many of them were incorporated into the projects. The first housing complex of the Lily Project was inaugurated a year later, in the Bronx, exactly in the area where Lily's mother had once lived. There were 50 small but well-planned apartments, with simple but quality finishes, community gardens, a small library, and even a playroom. The selected families received their keys in an emotional ceremony, and Lily was there, beside Michael, watching what had started as a drawing become a reality. One of the residents, a woman named Rachel, who was raising 3 children alone, hugged Lily and said something she would never forget. "Thank you, sweetie. You don't know what this means. To have a place of our own, a real place, where my children can grow up with dignity. Thank you for thinking of us." Lily couldn't answer. She just hugged Rachel back, tears streaming down her face. Michael watched from a distance, and in that moment he understood something profound. He had spent decades building skyscrapers, accumulating contracts, growing the company. But only now in this project born from the pain and hope of a child was he truly building something that mattered. It wasn't just walls and ceilings, it was life, it was future, it was humanity. But not everything was rosy. Roger Foster, though weakened and discredited, had not given up on his revenge. He began to work behind the scenes, networking with influential people, trying to undermine the Lily Project before it grew too large. He infiltrated people on the construction sites, promoted discreet acts of sabotage, leaked distorted information to the press. Michael knew Roger was behind it, but proving it was difficult. And despite the difficulties, he refused to give up. He had learned something important from Lily: persistence. No matter how many times you fall, the important thing is to get back up. And then, one night, something happened that would change everything once more. Lily, now 11 and more confident, was in her room doing homework when she heard Michael take a call in the living room. His voice was tense, irritated. She came out of her room quietly and listened from behind the door. "Roger," Michael was saying, "you're not going to destroy this. You can try as much as you want, but I'm not going to stop. This project is bigger than me, bigger than you, bigger than any personal dispute we have." Roger's response on the other end of the line was inaudible, but the tone was clearly aggressive. "Do what you want," Michael continued, "but know this: Lily taught me something you'll never understand. That true victory isn't about destroying the other person, it's about building something that makes a difference. And that's what I'm going to keep doing." He slammed the phone down and stood there, his hands trembling with anger and frustration. Lily entered the room and Michael turned, trying to hide his emotion. "You heard?" he asked. "I heard," Lily replied. "But you're right. He's not going to destroy what we're doing, because what we're doing is real, and the truth always wins in the end." Michael looked at the girl he had found on a Fifth Avenue corner just over a year ago, thin, dirty, alone. And now here she was, strong, confident, full of wisdom. And he realized something that filled him with pride and gratitude. Lily was no longer just a child. He had decided to care for. She was his daughter, in every sense that mattered, and together they would face whatever came next. The years passed with a speed Michael had never imagined possible. Lily grew, not just in height, but in confidence, in purpose, in dreams. The shy, frightened girl he had found on the corner of Fifth Avenue transformed into a determined teenager, passionate about architecture and social justice. At 15, Lily was already actively participating in the Lily Project meetings, no longer just as an inspiration, but as a collaborator. She studied urbanism, read books on public housing, watched documentaries on sustainable architecture. During school holidays, she insisted on visiting the construction sites, talking to the residents, understanding firsthand the impact the projects had on people's lives. Michael watched her with a mixture of pride and amazement. How had this child, who had come to him by chance, become someone so special? And more importantly, how had he himself transformed? The cold businessman, focused only on profits and contracts, no longer existed. In his place was a man who understood that true success was not measured in money, but in lives transformed. The Lily Project had grown, beyond all expectations. It was no longer just a division of Taylor Engineering, but a national benchmark in social housing. Universities studied their business model, governments from other cities requested consultations, international organizations invited Michael for lectures, and in every presentation he made sure to tell the story of a girl who found a lost briefcase and, without knowing it, saved not just a company, but a soul. But not everything was perfect. Roger Foster, though weakened, continued his attacks. He had never managed to destroy the Lily Project, but he never stopped trying. Unfounded lawsuits, anonymous complaints, to regulatory agencies, paid articles on dubious blogs. It was a war of attrition, and Michael was tired. One Saturday afternoon, as Michael was reviewing yet another legal document related to one of Roger's complaints, Lily walked into his home office and sat across from him. "You need to stop worrying so much about him," she said, her eyes fixed on her father. Michael sighed, taking off his glasses and massaging the bridge of his nose. "I know. But he doesn't give up. And every lawsuit, every complaint takes time and energy I could be using for important things." Lily leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. "Then ignore it. Let the lawyers handle it. You have more important things to do, like spending time with me, for example." Michael smiled despite his fatigue. "You're right. As always." Lily smiled back, but then her face turned serious. "Dad?" she continued, and Michael felt his heart tighten every time she used that word. "I need to tell you something." "Go ahead." I got a message on Facebook from someone who says he's my biological father. Michael froze. They had never talked much about Lily's father. They knew he existed, but they didn't know where he was, if he was alive, if he was interested in meeting his daughter. And what did the message say? Michael asked, trying to keep his voice calm. That he saw the documentary, that he found out about the story, and that he wants to meet me. And you, do you want to meet him? Lily hesitated, biting her lower lip the way she always did when she was nervous. I don't know. Part of me does. I want to understand where I came from, who he is, why he never looked for me before. But another part is scared of being disappointed, scared of ruining what we have. Michael stood up, walked around the desk and sat next to Lily, holding her hands. Lily, nothing you do will ever ruin what we have. You are my daughter. Not because of a legal paper, but because I chose you and you chose me. No one can take that away. So if you want to meet your biological father, I support you. And if you don't, I support you too. The decision is yours. Lily hugged Michael, and they stayed like that for a long time, in silence, just feeling each other's presence. 2 weeks later, Lily decided to meet her biological father. His name was Charles, and he lived in a cheap boarding house in the northern part of the Bronx. Michael offered to accompany her, but Lily wanted to go alone. She needed to do this on her own. When she came back hours later, Lily was different. Not sad, but thoughtful, as if she had seen something that had made her grow up suddenly. How was it? Michael asked, trying to hide his anxiety. Lily sat on the sofa, hugged one of the cushions, and began to tell her story. He's complicated. He works odd jobs, lives in a small room, drinks a little more than he should. He explained that when my mum got pregnant, they were very young, and he had a lot of problems. A drinking problem, debts, a messy life. My mum said it was better for him to leave, so he did. He tried to justify it, said he thought it would be better for me to grow up without him, but I saw it in his eyes. He knows he was a coward, that he abandoned us. And how do you feel about that? Michael asked. Lily thought for a moment. I don't feel angry, I don't feel hatred, I just feel nothing. He's a stranger to me, and I think he always will be. He had the chance to be my father, but he didn't want it. You had the chance, and you did. And that's the difference. Michael felt his eyes burn, but he held back the tears. You're not going to see him again. Maybe someday, but I don't need him in my life. I already have a father. The best father I could ever have. That night, Michael cried in the shower, letting the hot water wash away the tears. He cried with relief, with gratitude, with love. He cried for having found Lily, for her choosing to stay, for them having built something so beautiful together. The years continued to pass. Lily finished high school with excellent grades and was accepted into the School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation at Columbia University, one of the most competitive in the country. Michael had never been so proud. At the university, Lily stood out, not just for her grades, but for her passion. Her projects always had a social focus, always considered the less fortunate, always sought creative and inexpensive solutions to real problems. The professors adored her, her classmates respected her, and she always made a point of remembering where she came from. She never hid her story, never felt ashamed of having been a street kid. On the contrary, she used that experience as fuel to make a difference. During college, Lily began to gain recognition outside the university. She was invited to international housing forums, spoke at events, wrote articles for specialized magazines, and every time she stood on a stage, every time she picked up a microphone, she made sure to thank Michael for believing in her, for giving her a chance, for being a father when no one else wanted to be. Michael, now in his 70s, was beginning to feel the weight of his age. He was no longer the tireless businessman he once was. He tired more quickly, forgot small things, needed more rest. But he continued to go to the office, continued to follow the projects, continued to fight to make a difference. Lily noticed the change and began to take on more responsibilities at the company. At 23, fresh out of college, she was officially hired by Taylor Engineering as a junior architect, but everyone knew she was much more than that. She was the natural heir, not only to the company, but to the mission Michael had started. It was during a visit to one of the Lily project sites that Lily had the idea that would change everything. She was talking to a resident, Mrs. Celia, a grandmother raising her grandchildren alone who had just received the keys to her apartment. "This is a dream come true," Mrs. Celia said, tears streaming down her face. "But you know what I think about? I think about all the other families still waiting, all the children still on the streets, all the mothers working 3 jobs who still can't pay rent. We need more projects like this. Many more." Lily went home that night with Mrs. Celia's words echoing in her head. She was right. They were making a difference, but it was a drop in the ocean. To really change things, they needed to think bigger, bolder. The next morning, Lily called Michael for a serious conversation. They sat on the porch of the Greenwich Village house with coffee and warm pastries, and Lily presented her idea. "Dad, I want to propose something radical. I want Taylor Engineering to become a hybrid company, half focused on traditional business, on profitable contracts, on commercial buildings, and half focused on social causes, on public housing, on projects that don't make a profit but provide dignity." Michael listened in silence, sipping his coffee, watching his daughter's determined face. "You know this will meet resistance, right?" he finally said. "The board, the shareholders, many will think it's crazy. They'll say we're throwing money away that will go bankrupt." "I know," Lily replied, "but I also know that you always taught me something. That a true legacy isn't how much money we accumulate, but how many lives we transform. And this is our chance to transform many more." Michael was silent for a long time. He looked out at the city below, the buildings, the streets, the people rushing from one place to another. He thought about everything he had built, all the sacrifices, all the choices. And then he thought of Lily, the girl he had found by chance who had saved him without even knowing it, who had taught him how to be human again. "Let's do it," he said finally, a smile spreading across his face. "Let's turn this company into what it always should have been." The transformation wasn't easy. There were tense meetings, heated arguments, even a few resignations from directors who disagreed with the new direction. But Michael and Lily, working together, managed to implement the changes. Taylor Engineering officially became a hybrid company, with amended bylaws, redefined missions, and rewritten values. And the result exceeded all expectations. The social division not only survived, but thrived. Partnerships were formed with NGOs, governments, and international organizations. The model began to be replicated in other cities, other states, and the commercial division, instead of suffering, actually grew stronger. Investors wanted to be part of the transformation. Clients chose Taylor Engineering precisely because of its social mission. Lily was promoted to Director of Social Projects at 25. She was young, but no one doubted her ability. She knew every detail, every challenge, every solution. And more importantly, she knew the people. She knew what it meant not to have a roof over your head, what it felt like to be hungry, what it was like to be invisible. And she used that knowledge to create truly transformative projects. Michael, now 75, began to gradually step back from the company's daily operations. It wasn't an abrupt retirement, but a smooth transition. He spent more time at home, reading, tending to the garden, receiving visits from friends' grandchildren, enjoying life in a way he never had before. But his greatest joy was watching Lily shine, seeing the incredible woman she had become, the inspiring leader, the talented architect, the tireless advocate for the underprivileged. He knew his legacy was safe, not just the company, but the mission, the values, the purpose. Lily would carry it all on long after he was gone. Then came the day of Lily's official graduation from her master's program in human-centered urbanism, a specialization she pursued even after being well established in her career. The ceremony took place in an auditorium at Columbia, packed with family, friends, colleagues, and professors. When it was time for the graduation speech, Lily was chosen to represent her class. She walked onto the stage, elegant in a navy blue dress, her hair in a simple bun, her eyes shining with emotion. She began by talking about reconstruction, not of buildings but of destinies. She spoke about her own story without shame, without filters, about the child she had been, about the man who had saved her, about the journey they had taken together. She spoke about second chances, about choices, about love. "When I was 9 years old," Lily said, her voice firm but emotional, "I was invisible. People walked past me on the street and didn't see me. I was just another abandoned child, another social problem, another statistic. But one man saw me. He had no obligation to help me. He could have taken what he needed and moved on. But he chose differently. He chose to care. He chose to love. And that choice changed everything. It changed my life. It changed his. And now, through the work we do together, it is changing the lives of thousands of families." She paused, her eyes searching for Michael in the audience. He was sitting in the front row, tears streaming freely down his face, without any embarrassment. "So today," Lily continued, "I want to make a proposal. I want Taylor Engineering to officially become a dual-purpose company, half dedicated to business, half dedicated to social causes. And I want to take on that leadership with my father's blessing, with the support of our team, and with the hope that we can inspire other companies to do the same." The audience erupted in applause. Michael stood up, along with everyone else present, and clapped until his hands were red. That was his daughter. That was his greatest achievement. After the ceremony, in the parking lot, as they walked to the car, Lily took Michael's arm. "Dad," she said, "I want to thank you. For everything. For giving me a family, for believing in me, for teaching me that it's possible to build something bigger than ourselves." Michael stopped, turned to her and held her face in his hands. "I'm the one who should thank you, Lily. You saved me much more than I saved you. You taught me how to truly live. You gave me a purpose, you gave me love, and that's worth more than any fortune I could have ever accumulated." They hugged right there, in the middle of the parking lot, under the orange sky of the New York sunset. Two survivors, two souls who found each other at the most unlikely moment and built something beautiful together. The following years were ones of consolidation. Lily officially took over as CEO of Taylor Engineering at 30, becoming one of the youngest CEOs in the construction industry in the United States. Michael remained as chairman of the board, offering advice, supporting decisions, but letting Lily lead. Under Lily's leadership, the company expanded to other states. The hybrid model proved to be not only sustainable but highly profitable. Social impact investors from all over the world wanted to participate. International awards were won. And most importantly, thousands of families received decent housing. Thousands of children had a safe place to grow. Roger Foster ironically ended up bankrupt. His constant attempts to destroy Michael and Lily drained his resources, alienated partners, and ruined his reputation. In a final act of desperation, he tried to sue Michael for defamation, but the case was dismissed for lack of evidence. Roger disappeared from the New York business scene, and no one missed him. Michael, now in his 80s, was frail. His health, always robust, had begun to fail. Nothing serious, the doctors said, just the natural wear and tear of age, but he knew his time was running out. And he was at peace with it. One quiet afternoon, sitting on the porch of the Greenwich Village house with Lily by his side, he said something he had been holding on to for a long time. "Lily, I want you to know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I built buildings, accumulated contracts, won awards, but none of that matters compared to you. You are my true legacy." Lily held his hand, the hand that had once taken hers on the corner of Fifth Avenue, that had guided her to the bakery, that had signed the adoption papers, that had applauded her at graduation. "And you are my hero, Dad, not for being perfect, but for trying, for choosing me when no one else would, for giving me the chance to be who I am." They sat there in silence, watching the sun set over New York City, the city where it all began, the city that had witnessed an unlikely story of redemption, love, and transformation. Michael passed away peacefully 2 years later, sleeping in his bed, surrounded by Lily and a few close friends. He was 82 years old and had lived a life worth living. At the funeral, hundreds of people attended. Employees, business partners, residents of the housing complexes, university professors, even some journalists who had covered the story from the beginning. But it was Lily who gave the final eulogy, standing beside the casket, tears streaming freely. "My father was not a perfect man," she began. "He made mistakes, had flaws, spent decades living an empty life. But when he had the chance to change, he changed. He found me, or perhaps I found him, on a corner of Fifth Avenue. And from that day on, we rebuilt each other. He gave me a family, I gave him a purpose, and together we gave dignity to thousands of people." That is the legacy of Michael Taylor. Not the buildings he built, but the lives he transformed. And I will spend the rest of my life honoring that legacy. After the funeral, Lily returned to the company with more determination than ever. She expanded the Lily Project nationwide, forged international partnerships, and trained new architects in the philosophy of human-centered urbanism. Taylor Engineering became not just a successful company, but a symbol of hope that it is possible to do business and do good at the same time. Years later, when Lily was in her 40s, married with 2 young children, she visited the corner of Fifth Avenue where it all began. It was a Tuesday morning, just like that morning so many years ago. She stood there, watching the people pass by. Executives rushing to meetings, vendors setting up stalls, children on their way to school. And then she saw a little girl. She wasn't the same, but she was similar. Thin, poorly dressed, alone. Lily approached slowly, knelt in front of the girl, and asked for her name. The girl, suspicious, replied, "Marina." And so the cycle began again. Lily took Marina for breakfast, listened to her story, offered help. Because she had learned from Michael that true transformation begins with a choice. The choice to see those whom others do not. The choice to care when it would be easier to ignore. The choice to love when the world insists on indifference. And in that moment, standing in the bakery, watching Marina eat as if there were no tomorrow, Lily fully understood her father's legacy. It wasn't about building skyscrapers, it was about building bridges. Between people, between social classes, between dreams and reality. It was about turning chance encounters into families, despair into hope, invisibility into dignity. The lost briefcase was just the beginning. The real encounter was between 2 broken souls who, upon recognizing each other, began to heal. And now that healing was spreading, touching other lives, inspiring other stories, building a world where no child had to be invisible. Michael Taylor was no longer just a successful businessman. He was a symbol that it is never too late to change, to love, to make a difference. And Lily, the girl who found a briefcase in a trash can, had become the woman who found the true meaning of family, purpose, and legacy. And so in the city that never sleeps, where millions of stories unfold every day, the story of Michael and Lily endured. Not on plaques or monuments, but in every apartment built with dignity, in every child given a second chance, in every person who chose to see the invisible and extend a hand. The transformation didn't happen in a day, in a meeting, in a contract. It happened gradually, in small gestures, in daily choices, in persistent love. And the most beautiful thing of all is that this transformation continues, perpetuated by Lily and by all those who were touched by her and Michael's story. Because in the end, it's not the buildings that define us. It's the lives we touch. It's the choices we make. It's the legacies we leave. And Michael Taylor and Lily left a legacy that goes beyond concrete and steel. They left a legacy of humanity. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Michael and Lily has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of love, transformation, and second chances, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and remind us that it's never too late to start over, to love, and to make a difference. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.